Hello, everyone. My name is Vito Quaglia, and this is A Matter of Principle. Today, our guest is Mando Sallavanti, a financial planner from Lackawanna County. He is a young man who has made a successful start to his career. Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Sallavanti to the podcast. Welcome.
Vito, thanks for having me, man. Really, really excited for the conversation today.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. And yeah, let's just, throw it out there to the listeners and have them understand a little bit about you. So if you want to just give us a little bio, give us the Mondo story about, how things started for you and how you wound up where you're at right now.
So I grew up in Old Forge, PA, born and raised a Blue Devil, and playing football growing up. I think any ounce of work ethic stemmed from there. So I started when I was 10 years old. That kind of sparked things that I saw, hey, hard work matters and you could do some things with it, right? So played football, did that through high school, loved it, graduated. I go to East Stroudsburg playing there. I'm pre-med, and two things. I was pre-med because I wanted to be like my dad, who's a family doctor, and second, playing football there because I love football and the Kings, and finishing out my college there. Graduated from Kings and started my career in finance that I'm still in today, and a financial planner. I'm a certified financial planner and running my practice at MassMutual.
Now, when you talked about football and the discipline involved with that and, working towards that goal in all kind of, competitive sports, it really doesn't matter, but football was yours. Do you see things that maybe you take from that, all those years of competing and building up your knowledge base and your body and trying to do things, to be the best player you could be? Does that translate into what you do in your career, the way you prepare for things, or the kind of motivation that you have?
100%, 100%. And I think once you have that competitive bug, you have to find a way to keep it in your life in some way, shape, or form, whether you're competing with other people or competing with yourself from yesterday. And it started, like I mentioned slightly, it started when I was 10 years old, and I was a little chubby kid. So I'm out there going for runs. I was lifting weights. Like my dad had me in double hoodies and double sweatpants, just trying to make that weight limit. And I never missed one in junior football, and I always made it. And that was my first taste of it. So as I carried that to weight room and improving as a football player in high school, and then obviously in college as well, into my career, I was like, okay, sports are done now. How do I find this edge? How do I scratch that itch that competition brings you? And now in business, it comes from, how can I grow my business? Can I do better than I did last year? Can I bring more revenue in? Can I bring more clients in? And just continuing to push those boundaries and setting aspirational goals. I took all of those characteristics that in football, it might have been, hey, I want to get 5 sacks this year, or I want 5 forced fumbles, or whatever it is. Now it translates to my business revenue goals. More tactically though, the time management and the structure you're given in college as an athlete, especially, I mean, you get it in high school, but college even more so, because now you're on your own. They're telling you, hey, meetings are this time, lifting is this time, practice is here, you're going to watch film then you have study hall. That structure of a schedule made me live off of a calendar. So when I transitioned to my career, I had to live off a calendar. I had to pre-block my days. And I think doing that is one of the foundational pieces that's led to any success I've had so far.
Well, that's interesting that, that everybody, when we talk to people on the podcast about, leadership and goal setting and, having kind of a vision board, even, some people talk about vision board, things like that, about really making your goal something you can see every day. So it's interesting how you took some of those tangible things from sports and they just kind of traded it with some tangible things in your career, which is really cool. Now you mentioned, kind of where think you were going to go into the sciences, your grandfather being a science teacher, your father in medicine, and then you were kind of going in that direction initially. What made why finance? Like, why did you go? It's kind of it's still numbers. There's some math involved there, but two different worlds, right? Between the idea of sciences and medicine versus, money. So how did that big transition happen for you?
Yeah, I never saw myself getting into this industry, or nor did I even consider it. But growing up, the reason I looked up to my dad so much and the reason I wanted to be a doctor, it was twofold. Number one, I saw the life that I had growing up. I mean, we weren't filthy rich by any means, but you wake up on Christmas, there's presents there. Summer comes, it's June, July. You go on a vacation to the beach and you enjoy that week with the family and do nice things. So I'm like, all right, well, I had a good life growing up. So my dad clearly earns okay money that we could do this stuff. So I like that. And second, I noticed I was very attentive and I look back and I'm like, I picked up on these things that we'd go out for dinner, just say, and you're leaving the restaurant and you can't walk by the tables in the restaurant without five different people stopping my dad and just smiling ear to ear and laughing, joking with them. And I saw the relationships he had with people. And as I grew older, I realized he had really good relationships with a lot of people because of what he meant to their family, what he did for their family, and a lot of that coming through work. So I wanted that. I wanted a career that I could not only make good money, but I wanted a career that I could have impact on people. And when I had that moment in college where I said, you know what, I think that medicine probably isn't my path, a very good thing my dad did was set me up on networking calls with different professionals. The second call that I made was to his financial advisor then, Timmy Lavelle. Timmy's from music, and Timmy basically had a conversation with me for about an hour. This is almost 8 years ago that I had this conversation with him. And Timmy basically distilled what this career is down to one quick story. He said there's three things we all think about before we go to bed. The first thing we think about, am I healthy and are my loved ones healthy? And if they're not, you can call a doctor. You could do what you need to do, get the prescription. And he said, that's your dad. The second thing we do, did I hurt anyone today? Is there anything wrong that I did or something I need to make peace with in my mind? And if there is, or if there's not, you can pray about it. You could talk to a friend, whatever you need to do. And the third thing we think about just before we pass out, just before you go to sleep, am I doing the right things with my money? Can I afford to pay the bills for my family? Can I afford to pay for what we need to do to have the lifestyle that we want? And he said to me, when you're a financial advisor for someone's household, you become the third thing people think about before they go to bed. So when I heard that, I realized I could have impact, make a good living, and get to where I want to be just in a different way than what I traditionally was looking at being a doctor for.
Yeah, and I never really thought of it in that kind of realm, but the two things that you referenced in the last couple of things you mentioned really go hand in hand with building relationships and trust, right? I mean, just like you would have a relationship with your doctor, your dentist, or whoever it is about your health and your family's health, and you have to trust that person that you're going to make sure you're going to be okay and they're not going to prescribe anything that would be, adverse to your health or your family's health. You're doing the same. You're a doctor, you're a physician, someone who's taking care of the financial health of a person and their family. So it's different but similar in so many ways. So that's a really interesting take on that. And I understand what you're saying about watching your dad interact with people, in a small town like Old Forge. Everyone knows everyone anyway, right? But then the fact that he's built these bonds with people and they kind of see him as almost a part or an extension of their own family when they recognize him out in public and stuff. And the fact that you can kind of do the same thing but now, in the world of finance as opposed to medicine. So really cool, a really cool origin story that you have going on. So let's just back up a little bit and go in the time machine back in your high school days. Okay. Whether it was a teacher or a coach or maybe even somebody in your community growing up in those years, those formative, teenage years before you went off into college, who do you think had the biggest impact or influence over you, as a teenager growing up?
If I had to distill it down to a coach, probably at Old Forge, Coach Dan Holland. He was my linebacker coach and defensive coordinator, and he did our strength program. I lifted weights with him every day during the school week, and that was for 3 years. I did that, and he had he had a really big impact on me in the sense that there was always the thought of pushing yourself to do more than you think you could, but in a healthy way, not in a way that there's ever you tear yourself down or anyone else down or look at things negatively, but you push yourself to go further than you ever could. And I think I became a better player because of that. I pushed myself in the weight room more than I would have had I not been working out with him. It led over onto the football field. And there's so many people I can mention. Coach Schuback, Coach Mike Schuback, who's still coaching the Blue Devils, like huge impact on my life and a lesson I take from Coach Schuback that I remember him saying this, I was on the team in 2013 where we lost the state championship. And I just remember he said to us, he said, if losing a football game is the worst thing that's going to happen in your life, then you lived a pretty good life, my friend. Those words stick with me to this day. And not just from the football perspective, but I think in our day to day, Vito, like we take for granted so many things that we just have that other people wish for. And like you get stuck in traffic or you get stuck at a train and you're late for something and now your whole day's ruined and it's carrying over to the next. And it's like, if that's the worst thing that happened in your day, like how lucky do you have it? You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
I would say Coach Holland, Coach Schuback, those two guys had a really big impact on me.
And then you mentioned a little bit about how, playing in college was different than high school. And, the makeup of your day and your schedule and the more freedom you have and whatnot. How did you, I guess, transition there? I mean, was that easy for you to, like, just the way you were brought up and maybe some of the goals and the way you kind of shaped what you were doing as a youngster before you went to college, or was doing things a different way in college a challenge for you?
It was a culture shock at first, 100%. I was a high honor student my entire high school. I always got good grades. And it wasn't because, and I don't say this like for any type of way other than to illustrate the point. I really didn't bring books home. I didn't study much. School just came to me. Like I was very fortunate, very lucky that I just got school. It made sense to me. I get to college and it's significantly more difficult where I needed to be studying at night. I needed to be going to the library. And my first semester, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't holding myself accountable. I didn't pass two of my classes. And that was just the biggest punch in the face ever. Like football was great. I got the football schedule because they lined up like, all right, you're here at this time. You're here at this time. You're here at this time. Very simple. But when it came to school and I had to create my structure for it, I struggled. So when I got to King's College after I transferred and being closer to home helped because my parents were here and there was kind of a level of accountability with them. I recognized that I needed to plan in blocks to my day for schoolwork outside of class, just like I was planning in blocks to my day for a workout for football or extra film study for football. And I started doing this. My calendar became what dictated my day. If it was on my calendar, it happened. To this day, that's the way I live. If it's on my calendar, it happens. If it's not, it doesn't happen. So acclimating to that was a culture shock at first, but something that was a very valuable lesson I learned.
And that kind of routine, that type of, discipline and time management. I mean, I think for some people, it's one of those non-negotiables like that. Like you said, if it's on the calendar, it gets done. If it's not there, we're not doing it. And that really, I think, helps shape people accomplishing goals, and for some people, they don't need it. So other people kind of fly by the seat of their pants and really don't need the structure. But, I'm not in that park because if I don't, I'm sometimes a late adopter when it comes to things. I need a little fire, underneath me to get things done. So, having that discipline, it's something that, like, look, this has to get done today, that, you finally kind of, check that box off. So going into, what you do for a living, right? What would you say? Let's start with a positive thing. What's the best thing or the best thing about your job, or the coolest thing that you get to do because of what you do as a career? Like, what would you say that is?
The best thing about what I do to me is that my day consists of talking to very successful, very interesting people. The people that I'm working with in general, what I'm helping them with is like, all right, you have your money, you're in a situation today, you want to be in a certain situation in the future, whatever that is. There's a gap that we need to bridge there, that something is missing from their situation around their money. They don't have expertise, they don't have time, whatever it may be. They need help with something. That's where my team comes into play. And I have partners that I work with, and a couple administrative assistants, but we come in and we help them get to that point and provide clarity around that. But my favorite thing is just like, it's great conversations with great people every day. And I feel very blessed to be able to do it.
How do you build that trust that is needed for somebody to say, okay, I'll, believe what you say about what I should do with my money? How do you do that? Like what's the way that, you meet somebody first time you ever meet them, or whether it's a phone call or a sit down, face to face kind of thing? What do you do to kind of let them know they can trust you? Are there things that you bring up initially with everybody, or is every interaction with people, is every relationship different? How does that work?
I post a lot of content on social media to try to let people into my world before they ever inquire about our business. So
Okay.
ideally, they've seen me around, they've seen what we're about. That's the ideal world. But let's talk from the perspective that they haven't seen that. And even if they have seen that, this still does go the same way. So anyone that comes to us and they're like, hey, Mando, I think I need some help with X, Y, and Z. I'd love to talk to you more about what you guys do and learn more. We do an initial call for about 30 minutes. Sometimes it goes over, sometimes it's shorter, just depends. That call is completely about that person, for me to get in their mind of, why are we here today? Like, what's the thing that before you go to bed, that's what you're thinking about, and you decided, all right, it's time I talk to somebody and get some help with this focus of mine. The next things we go into are, what have you been doing? Why do you feel like it hasn't worked? Why do you feel like you may need support? And then we talk about those things. We'll probably dive deeper. I ask about desired reality. So that future vision that I alluded to a little bit ago, I'll ask them, and I'll really try to help people stretch what that looks like, and make it more vivid, paint that picture. Because a lot of people haven't even thought about what the future looks like. They're just trying to solve problems of today, but they don't even know where they want to be tomorrow, which is really the big problem for many people out there. So we define that. Then once we're at the point in the call, we define that. My next question is, why can't you do it yourself? Like, what's the struggle? What's the challenge? And then what is the support you need? How does my team insert into this? What would it ideally look like if we were sitting here a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You look back and you say, Mando, it's been amazing to work with you. What does that relationship look like? So those are the types of things we're discussing in that first call. By the end of that call, I always will say, hey, I'm going to spit this back to you to make sure I'm understanding things the way you're telling me them today. And I spit it back to them. And either I hit it on the head, or they fill me in on some gaps. From that point forward, we're on the same page. They know I get them. And once someone knows that you understand them, that gives me the privilege to come in on our next call and give them, here's how our process goes. This is our framework. These are the areas of opportunity we see for you based on our first call. This is what we charge. And we leave it up to the client from there. We're never going to be pushy with someone. It's really, after that, they have all the facts and it's their decision to make. But one last thing on this point. It's important to note that every client that works with us, we sign a contract that states we're obligated to act in their best interest. I think that's important. Obviously, hey, it's a contract, it's a piece of paper, but it is another thing that adds a layer of security for the client from their perspective. So that's what it typically looks like, from point A that we never talked to someone before to point B that they become a client.
Okay. And it's interesting because, that kind of resonates in so many different aspects, in so many different careers. That idea of, where are we? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? And that's kind of like that self-assessment at the beginning. And then you try to figure out that end goal, and then what obstacles are in the way, and what do we need to do to move those obstacles to accomplish that goal. So that's what's fun for me, talking about people in so many different fields. And it all kind of gets back to that. It gets back to that kind of thing. And it gets back to relationships, which you referenced so many times, relationships with clients, relationships with mentors. And that idea of, and you're in a little different world, like where, you said contractually you're going to sign something and it's that bond, that people can trust that. But in essence, when your method of communication, when you listen, you're an active, listener, and you kind of give that back to show them that you're actually paying attention, right? And then that's where that trust starts to build. Like, hey, wait a minute, this guy actually was listening to me when I was talking. It wasn't just kind of, you know, looking at me, but thinking about something a thousand miles away. So, those things are so, everybody that we've talked to so far on the podcast that is successful in what they do, elements of what you're bringing up is also in their world as well. So it doesn't really matter what you do. It all seems like it comes down to relationships and that concept of, when you're teaching, right? If you remember being in front of in a classroom and looking up at somebody, whether it was a teacher or coach or whoever, that idea that we don't really care how much you know until we know how much you care, kind of thing. And that is so important in so much of what we do. Now, what are one of like you talked about social media and having a presence on social media, which is so important today, but how much of that do you see, and when you talk to some people, maybe they're not as savvy with social media, right? So what do you have to use more traditional ways to communicate with them, or even showing, like, I guess it would be easier to forecast and show, like, different ideas of where things are going to go, like what the market's going to look like in, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, if you're using technology. But do you talk to anybody who's kind of more old school and needs more like paper stuff in front of them and you have to transition to that kind of stuff, or is everybody technologically savvy these days?
We get both sides of it, man. I mean, we have your people that they're never going to open an email that you send them, never mind to get on social media, right? And what's interesting, this actually ties into the last point of people don't know people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The content I'm actually putting out on social media, for the most part, there's a small slice that is very informational, educational, and I try to have an element of that in everything. But the bulk of the content I put out, it's completely catered to the ideal client that I feel that I can help, that I'm best equipped to go work with their household and help them achieve their goals. Everything is catered to them, talking about their fears, their frustrations, their wants, their aspirations, as well as stories of people that I've helped and giving them an insight of like, this is what we've done for people. This is what's happened. This is what's possible and what could be possible for you working with us. So I try to keep it in that realm because at the end of the day, I also think if you're someone that needs help with your finances and will accept help, you're probably not going to be the one that's reading charts and reports and like very info heavy content like that all day. So it's been a lot of that just to paint that picture. But back to like the initial point of the question, we get both sides of it, man. I mean, we work with people in their 20s all the way up to people in their 60s and people in their 70s that are already retired. But the commonality, I think, between a lot of the people we work with, they usually have some sort of a variable compensation to the way they earn income, whether they're a business owner or a high performing salesperson.
Now, you talked about your what you're doing right now. You're based in northeastern Pennsylvania, but I would I would guess that so much of what you do is really global, right? I mean the things the money that
Mm-hmm.
is out there in investments and things moving around really aren't just pigeonholed in one corner of the state. So how much of that for what you do you have to have like your eyes on everything? Like when you're giving advice or you're trying to help clients with certain, programs or platforms, anything like that, how much, like, how are you learning all the time? Are you constantly looking in certain areas to try to one up, your competition, that kind of thing? How much do you have to do every day to make yourself more informed?
I pretty much have to research every single day of my career, whether it's on markets or tax law or other types of laws that come into play with clients, maybe with insurances or with their benefits at work. Whatever you want to throw at an example, there's pretty much research I have to do every day. And the reason for that is every client's different, first of all. But second, we work with people all over the country. So you're spot on. The social media thing has really helped. And specifically with LinkedIn, LinkedIn's been massive for me in terms of lead generation for business and the families we help from there. We're in over 35 states right now in terms of households. So there's a lot that we have to learn all the time. And it involves us improving our skills, of course, which is great. But we're the first ones to tell clients, like, hey, if there's a situation we don't know, that's fine, but we're going to do the research and we'll get back to you. I think that's an important thing to distinguish. Good example I'll give you, Vito. We had clients that are from New Jersey. They vacation in Mexico a lot, specifically Tulum in Mexico. So they go there 3-4 times a year. It's the only place they ever travel to for the most part. They tell me they want to buy a property. I say, guys, I know nothing about international real estate. I've never helped a client buy international real estate. Let me talk to some people I know. I'll get back to you by the end of the week and we'll start with the process of how to get this down. I have a buddy who's an advisor in Texas. I call him. He connects me to a guy who's an attorney for real estate in Texas, who connects me to a guy who owns a title company in Latin America, who connects me to an attorney in Latin America to do closings, who connects me to a realtor in Latin America to do closings. And I got the whole team together, realtor, title company, and attorney. My clients are in Tulum actually as we speak here last week of July. They just went down and they're viewing 5 properties with the realtor. So it's something where if you talked to me a year ago, I had zero clue about how to do this thing. And now I feel like I'm an expert in how to buy a property in Mexico. So to give you a real life example, it just depends on what's going on with the client. And I'm growing every day, have to be researching every day, have to be learning every day, or else my clients will leave me behind, quite frankly.
And well, that's a really cool story about how, even what you do on a daily basis evolves and changes so much based on client needs and then, your availability to keep learning. And that's one of the things, when I talk to folks about education and the future of education, really that's where we need to be. I mean, students, when they leave high school, they leave college, they just have to learn how to learn, right? Like just the idea that something that you learned when you're 14 or 18 or 22, that piece of information is really going to be relevant later. I mean, it might be, but it's the idea that you have to keep researching, keep learning, keep figuring out, what new innovations are out there. And that's the thing. So I think it's funny because there's all these, when I talk to people who are teachers or school administrators and they get off on tangents about, the kind of the handcuffs that are put upon teachers because of state test scores and funding tied to this or that. When it all comes down to it, the education that we use in the real world to pay our bills all has to do about learning and not just learning, but when you talked about networking, I mean, that's the other thing there. It goes back to relationships. Now, if you didn't have the soft skills to build those relationships with those people that you put together that team with, like if you were some kind of guy that was short and, too full of himself and didn't know how to carry a conversation the right way, they're not going to interact with you. They're not going to take that phone call or, follow up on an email or a text. They're going to be like, oh, that Mando guy, he's an idiot. Like so you had to invest the time to build the relationships and then you go and create a team that helps you be successful in your career. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. And it's really cool to hear you kind of synthesize all that together. And again, somebody who, not for nothing, starting off in your career, it's not like you've been doing this for 30 years. You're relatively new in what you're doing, only doing it for a few years, but it seems like you're really starting to understand all the little bits and pieces of this. Am I right on that, or am I kind of just going off on a tangent?
100. No, you're 100%. And that's a great point to make. I've been doing this a little bit over 4 years. Am I good at what I do? Yes. But I'm the first person that will recognize I haven't seen everything. I don't know everything. But what I do have is a network I could tap into, people that I can go to, be humble and say, I don't know this. Can you help me or find me someone or put me in touch with someone who can? I think that's probably one of the best lessons I've learned so far in my career. And this is directly from Timmy Lavelle, who's been my mentor and now is one of my partners in business. And we work together. He taught me early on. He said, look, you can't possibly know everything. So if you don't, tell the person you don't and tell them you'll get back to them. But what's unacceptable and what you have to do after that, it's unacceptable to not go find someone who doesn't. It's unacceptable to not figure it out. That's what you have to do. And learning that from Timmy when I was a 22-year-old at the time, now being 26, just been a game changer for everything. Game changer.
And if you hit on a concept, two concepts really, I guess, is, staying humble and staying hungry, right? You always want to keep making yourself the best version of what you are or who you are. And also with that kind of humility, like, I think I'm okay at this, but I know I can get better. And you kind of not getting, over your skis when it comes to making decisions. And honestly, that authenticity that you said, telling people up front, look, I'll get back to you. I don't know this, because if you end up trying to just, BS them a little bit, especially when it comes to money and things don't go the right way. You could be costing some, well, not, you lose a client naturally, but, you cost people money because you kind of ill advise them in one area because you're trying to fake it a little bit, and that would be disastrous. So yeah, I think that's, Timmy Lavelle's advice to you there, and how you're actually using it, I think is the way to go. Now, you're born and bred in Northeast PA, like you said. Now, what have you seen as somebody who's, in the professional world now? What do you see about the potential of Northeastern Pennsylvania? Is, when it comes to, like, you're dealing with some highly successful people that are clients of yours, and what's the overall temperature of Northeast PA? Is there a lot of potential for the future here? Like, what do people think about this area?
I personally love Northeast Pennsylvania. I'm still living here. I love it. I think the thing about Northeast Pennsylvania is that the way people naturally treat each other here, regardless of what you could say at a face level, I think people are naturally good people from this area, and there's a strong level of hospitality no matter where you go. I've lived in Old Forge. I've lived in West Pittston. I now live in Moosic. Every single town I've been in, the neighbors are welcoming. People are awesome. I think that that is just a feel of our area. And what I've seen outside the area, as I've had clients from all over the country, it's not a normal thing. The level of hospitality, the way you naturally treat people, the level of care you naturally take in them, it's not normal. It's not everywhere. And I think that's a strong point of this area. Now, in terms of potential, just as I've mentioned, my business has grown around the country. I'm based here. I think that there's a lot of people and a lot of ways businesses can take advantage of social media to grow their businesses around the country, even being based in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And the trickle down effect of that is you have a successful business that may be benefiting not just from localized revenue, but revenue all over. That's obviously coming back to the area if you're based here. So I think it's a big thing that people could take advantage of, whether you're in Northeast Pennsylvania or if you're in New York City. I mean, yes, geography is a factor, but social media has made the world smaller than ever. And I only feel so strong about this because I've seen it in my own life.
Well, exactly. And I think that, that kind of, intangible of what you're mentioning, the way people treat each other, and that kind of familiar bond that you have in Northeast PA. We were speaking to somebody on the podcast, and one time they were talking about people who, work remotely, and the fact that they could live anywhere, but you have these people that are moving into communities like Luzerne, Lackawanna County because of that, because of what's around. If you want to go skiing, or if you want to go see a baseball game or a hockey game or concerts, whatever it is, there's so many different kind of social aspects here in the communities. And then you bring in the idea of how the neighbors are, people are welcoming in different communities around here. And so, yeah, you could kind of have all the advantages of a global market, when it comes to your career, but then the idea of where you raise your family and what you're doing on a daily basis and on the weekends, you could do it here. So that's another thing that's been echoed. I mean, we've probably heard the same thing from the last 4 or 5 or 6 guests, talking about that, how there is that kind of sense of, a place to grow up, to raise kids, to feel kind of safe and secure, but yet all the growth that you could have with what your career is. Just a couple things, we're going to take a little bit of a left turn, but, you talked about social media. Are there, I don't know, I wouldn't say, would you consider, are you on the verge of trying to be like an influencer? Like when you're out there putting all that content out there, are you trying to create more, are you building your brand that way through social media and trying to get your name out there so people recognize you for other things and expand what you're doing? Or is it just purely just for your business?
No, it's both sides of it, I think. And there's been There's been ancillary benefits. I mean, when I started posting on social media consistently, LinkedIn is the main platform I post on. The other one is Instagram. I do a little on Facebook, but mainly LinkedIn is where I focus. And 2 years ago, it started. The goal was to get clients. I've done that. I still get clients there. It's my main source of clients, but I've had great opportunities come for it. I mean, I've had brand partnerships. I've had sponsorships that come from it. There's some other things in the work that will come in the future that I don't want to talk about yet, but there's been a lot of ancillary benefits on the influence side in terms of just in general with people, but also within my industry with speaking events. And one of the main goals for my career and my future as time goes on, I want to continue to post content and grow out social media, but I want to get into more speaking. I've done a little bit of speaking. I mean, I've done a ton of podcasts. I've done quite a bit of even videos on YouTube with people. I've done a couple keynotes. I want to get more into the keynote space, more into the circuit there within my industry, outside of my industry. But I recognize with that, Vito, and with influence in general through social media, I think all of that trickles down as long as I impact people and treat them well and I grow my business and that gets more and more successful. And as I become more and more successful, those three things combined, that will trickle down to the influence through social media, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Now you mentioned kind of you alluded to the future a little bit, but where do you see yourself? Now you said you're 26, you've been doing this about 4 years. Where do you see yourself in 10 years or 20 years? Like what goals does Mondo have for the future of what you're going to be doing?
Yeah. Looking forward, I want to build this practice out with my partners, and I think I always am examining, am I in the right opportunity vehicle? Am I in the right, are you in the right seat that where you are can actually take you to where you want to be? And in the career I'm in, I fortunately feel like yes, absolutely. It's a great vehicle to build something out, have a career where it has meaning, make money doing it. So continuing to build the financial planning practice, but on top of that, and at a higher level, I'd love to be in a position where I could develop other people in this career, whether it's directly having them as a part of my team as our business grows, or maybe it's just doing coaching in addition to the financial planning work I'm doing. So if I'm coaching other advisors who are trying to get to that next level and get to a place that I've already gotten past and now giving back and building an ancillary business there where I'm giving them the advice. I'd love to do that. I already talked about the speaking. That's a big thing that I'd like to do in the future. So just continuing to grow upon and build out what I'm doing in this space, but in different ways, in addition to the main thing is doing financial planning.
Now you mentioned earlier when we first started to talk, you mentioned how as a youngster, seeing how your father interacted with community people, people in the community, whether you just saw it there and you didn't really know what was going on, even was a smile that was flashed or a handshake or, a funny story that was, engaged between your dad and somebody in the public. How much of that do you think about, when I'm sure you want to be successful, you want to be the best version of what you're doing right now, but do you think of, the bigger things like, your impact in the community, you mentioned about giving back, which is kind of, where I'm going. How much of what you're doing in your plans on a daily basis or in the future, whatever it is, has to do with, outward, not just, the end of the week and how successful you are with what you're doing, but your impact on the overall community?
Yeah, so right now I volunteer with the Old Forge football program in a limited capacity. I wish I could give more time than I do right now, but I'm with them 2 days a week volunteering. I go on Thursdays and then I'm there on game day as well to help them out and do some things. So I love being around the program. It's awesome to do that. And second to that with King's College with their football program, I try to be involved, make a donation every year, give them some money and help out with the program in any way I can. With them, it's not so much any coaching or anything like that, but the head coach now, Coach Zabrowski, he was my position coach. He was my defensive coordinator when I played in school, and I still hold a really good relationship with him and probably talk to him every week to this day. even being out of school now over 5 years. So with them, I try to be involved, whether it is monetarily or just another voice as someone who could talk to the players, give advice on transitioning from college into their careers, stuff like that. Football did so much for me, and the network I got from football did so much for me that I want to be around that arena, around that world still, so I could hopefully help one or two kids every year that maybe they were a kid that's going to give up on it. Maybe they were a kid that's on the border of like, do I really like this game? And they might not even be a superstar player, so to speak, but if I could give them an ounce of proof that no matter how good of a player you are, just being in this environment will make you a better person. I want to have that impact on the youth and people coming up through high school, people going through college.
That's good. Good to hear. That's good to hear. Now you've been impacted by positive mentors and leaders your whole life, whether it was people that you saw in your own family, people that, you saw in school and sports, even in the business world with the mentors you talked about there. What do you think? What's your opinion of what makes a great leader?
I think it starts with recognizing that leadership looks different depending on who's receiving it. So a leader needs to understand if someone's motivated by being yelled at, if someone's motivated that you're on them constantly, or if someone's motivated by just a look and a head nod might be all they need, or maybe they need to be left alone. A great leader, I think, comes down to being a chameleon. You need to know when to have what attitude, when to have what type of approach with someone and mold that to the person that you're quote unquote leading.
And I think that, part that the chameleon kind of thing, being a different person to knowing the need of the person you're trying to help and trying to service. I mean, that also happens with you, what you do. Like when you interview these clients and try to figure out what their financial needs are, everybody has something. They're coming from a different angle, right? And you have to kind of be a chameleon in what programs you push and what, financial advice you give this person versus this person. So it's similar, but different again, right? Like, so some of those things that you saw, being impacted in your life so far by your mentors and leaders that you've had also feeds into what you do, even though it's money and not sports, that kind of thing, but it's kind of similar. What would you say? Now, so much of what you do is communication, right? Whether it's social media or the way you talk with people. You said, you already want to get more into speaking and things like that. What makes a great communicator? Like when you see somebody out, whether it's online somewhere when you watch a video, or if you're at a conference, or if you're somewhere even at a local place and someone kind of has center stage, has the room. What is it that makes someone an effective, a really good communicator?
I think what makes someone an effective communicator is when they can leave you with something that's memorable. So what I mean by that is, can they tie back a point that you made to a story? So I always felt like I was okay at talking. It came somewhat natural to me to be in front of a camera or have a conversation with someone. And it's not to say I was ever the most outgoing person. I actually feel like I'm a little bit more of an introvert, and I've learned some of these extroverted qualities as time went on. I worked with a coach earlier in 2023, and working with her, she's done a few TEDx talks. And for anyone who doesn't know what TEDx is, it's a very prestigious business circuit that if you get a talk with them, it's considered a big deal. She coached me on saying, Mando, every time you want to make a point that really sticks, you need to tie it back to even a short story that is something people can remember, like I'm doing right now. Oh, hey, Mando had that coach that he worked on to get a little bit better at speaking because he felt like he was already good, and getting that help from her really feels like he put him to another level. So I think anyone that's an effective communicator, they can tie back a point that they want to make to a story from their past. And it helps because the person can remember that, but it also helps because it gives social proof that they have experience with the point that they're making.
That is so really refreshing and cool to hear. I mean, I that's something that I agree with 100%. But to hear somebody again, I know it might make it sound like I'm talking to somebody from a different planet, but I really know nothing about financial planning. So listening to you and how so many of the things you deal with is so universal. I'm a former English teacher and then, became a high school principal. So those worlds usually did not mesh, financial planning and basically storytelling, right? So you're coming back to communication and tying everything to a story, which, and like you grow up around here. That's another thing I think is strength in this area. So many of our families that came up, the immigrants that came over, whether you're Italian, Irish, Polish, whatever, the old school people that came over in the beginning of the century, the coal miners and whatnot, all the families, all the churches, all the faiths, they all had their stories, right? They all had their church picnics and they gathered around and told stories about what happened in the old countries and things like that. And I think so much of that is in the fabric of who we all are. And when you use those things that you've kind of innately been given, the gifts you've been given to further what you're doing in a career, I mean, that's really, really cool. So I love the fact that you're tying all that kind of stuff together. Really neat. Well, I can't believe we've been talking so much and it's been really awesome, but we're going to wrap it up in a minute or so. So I just wanted to throw out there, is there anything, any topic, anything you wanted to discuss that we didn't get to? Anything you want to bring up?
I mean, I've loved the direction of the conversation, man. I think we hit on a lot of things, even some of it that I've done a bunch of podcasts, and even some of it I probably never spoke about on a podcast before. So anytime I have a conversation like that, I mean, it's a really enjoyable one for me. And in the last couple minutes, whatever way you want to take it, man, I'm more than open to.
Well, what I'd like to do is basically, close it with an open invitation. I'd like to, if it's okay with you, get you back on here, maybe in a couple months, maybe at the end of the football season,
Yeah.
to compare notes to see how the Blue Devils did,
Yeah.
and things like that. And then also where you're at with your career, because if there's nothing else that I've been learning is things are happening and changing so quickly. So something that you might be doing now, if we talk again in 6 months, you might be on to something completely different. You know what I mean? And I think I'm like the old buck around here anymore. I mean, and my oldest is 20, going to be 26. So we have 3 children. And so hearing that generation talk about what they're going through as they enter into their careers and, the obstacles and challenges and successes is really, it's fun for me. So I enjoyed this kind of conversation. And like I said, I'll be throwing this out to you again, probably in a couple months to see if you'd come back. We'd love to have you on again. I think it was a great time, and just want to thank you for giving us that time.
Yeah, Vito, thanks so much for having me. It's humbling. I appreciate it so much, and I'll come back anytime, brother. Anytime.
All right, we appreciate that. So again, this has been Mando Sallavanti.